The banner hit me like a cold wind. Happy 8th Zoe in rose gold cursive glittering over pastel plates while a woman I didn't know arranged cupcakes nearby. My chest went hollow and I felt something small and tight break inside me. Mom hovered with a gift bag as if this were ordinary like Sunday dinner like a quick favor. Noah squeezed my hand, looked up at me with that hopeful, trusting face 8-year-olds have, and whispered, "It's okay, Daddy. Maybe next year." I told myself I could laugh it off. I told myself to be the calm guy who keeps things running. I told myself nothing at all and walked out instead. I didn't argue in the room. I didn't snatch a cupcake or raise my voice. I left with my son and closed the door to the space we had rented with my money and my planning. The air in the hallway felt louder than the party inside. My phone buzzed with a notification from Marissa about setup, and I opened the message, hands steady even though my throat felt raw. I canceled the extras right there, face painters, extra hours, the inflatable that Noah had been dying to climb. I thought about the spreadsheet that had mapped this day, neat columns tallying dollars and time, and I wiped my finger across the balance like erasing a line in a ledger. The cancellation call was quieter than I expected. Marissa asked if everything was okay. I said no, simply and honestly, and then explained that the room had been used without my consent. She listened, clarified contract terms, and I gave her the details she needed. I felt strangely rational as I read dates, times, and the clause about exclusive use. It was business, not a showdown, and business could be dissected and fixed. When she said she would handle the dispute, a little of my heat faded, replaced by a cold, practical satisfaction that the facts were on my side. As I canceled services, my phone began to collect a storm of calls and texts. Family members called first, short bursts of anger and disbelief. Mom's voice was a mix of hurt and accusation. "You ruined everything for her," she said. I told her, "I didn't ruin anything. I stopped being taken for granted." There was a silence on her end that felt like a held breath. Lily texted a string of exclamation points and heart emojis, then called with silk-smooth excuses. "We thought it would be a sweet surprise. You know how we all jump in." I said, "Jumping in doesn't mean taking over someone's paid reservation," and my voice didn't break when I said it. I thought about all the times I'd been the person who leapt without being asked. Fixing a leaky sink at midnight, lending my card to cover an unexpected bill, hauling furniture on a Saturday while everyone else ate. Those favors had become invisible rails supporting the family train. I had been the rail. People walked over me and didn't see the scratches on my hands. That morning, with Noah holding my other hand, I refused to be the invisible rail any longer. I'm not dramatic by nature, but this time I wanted my son to learn something different. I wanted him to know that his day mattered and that his time was not negotiable. After I closed out the services, I drove us to the neighborhood park with the backyard of my childhood not far in my head. The sky was ordinary and the playground smelled like rubber and grass, and Noah ran for the big slide like nothing had happened. We ate grocery store cupcakes on a bench, blue frosting smeared on our fingers, and opened a small Lego set that I had bought impulsively on the drive. My co-parent showed up with juice boxes and a warm look, and we made a messy little party between swings and a sandbox. All of it a counterweight to the glittered banner we left behind. The blows came in other forms. Social media filled with pictures of Zoe under the rose gold script and family captions about how everything worked out so well, as if a private choice had been a group decision. Calls from relatives shifted from concern to sermon. Didn't I love my family? Was charity not my duty? I sat in my car and let the calls roll to voicemail. I blocked a recurring payment request from my mother's mechanic and canceled an automatic billing link that had been quietly snagging money out of my account for years. Small, administrative acts felt like sutures. I set up an automatic transfer into Noah's account for his portion of every shared expense going forward, and then I booked an appointment with a therapist. There was fear there too, the fear that setting limits would fracture the family into shards too sharp to reconcile. But I could not undo what I had learned about being loved for what I did instead of who I was. That afternoon, when Mom came to the door and demanded I speak, I kept the chain on. She wanted me to apologize or refund the difference to make the day right. I told her I wanted the pattern to stop and that I wasn't willing to be the backup plan for other people's convenience anymore. She left a card in the mailbox later with "Family Share. Don't be a stranger" written in my mother's looping hand. I put it in a drawer next to a measuring tape and spare batteries and didn't answer when she called again. My actions were small and practical, canceling, blocking, transferring, but they were also loud in their message. I was drawing a line and I was tired of having it ignored. Noah slept that night with Lego pieces under his pillow and dinosaur books on his bedside table, and for the first time in a long while I fell asleep feeling that I had, at least for one day, kept a promise to him. I grew up being the guy who fixed things because no one ever asked if I could do it, they just assumed I would. I fixed cars at midnight, reset Wi-Fi when the signal died, and rearranged my life so other people's plans worked. My role was simple and clear to them. Oldest son, the steady hand. Lily, my younger sister, carried the family's softer story. She was the one with the flawless photos, the little girl with bows so big they looked like tiny umbrellas, and the label my mother used, sensitive, which translated in our house to everyone else having to bend. When Lily's voice caught, the family mobilized. When mine did, I learned to swallow it and keep going. The favors started small and multiplied. I lent my pickup, paid an emergency vet bill, co-signed a short-term loan for my dad, and stayed late at work so someone else could pick up a child. Each time I helped, I told myself it was just this once, and each time it slid into place like another brick in the family wall. Over the years, those bricks built habits, requests became expectations, and expectations became a quiet blueprint everyone followed. I was proud to be reliable. Sorry for the quick interruption. If you're enjoying this so far, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and leave comment below. It really helps the channel grow. Alright, let's jump back into the story. I was proud until being reliable meant being invisible, except for what I delivered. Becoming a dad changed the math. Noah, my son, didn't care about family dynamics. He cared about dinosaur trivia and whether a cupcake had sprinkles. He added real non-negotiable costs to my life. Diapers that needed buying, daycare that had to be paid on time, dentist visits scheduled and kept. I worked nights in spreadsheets, now not for work budgets, but for practical survival: groceries, gas, braces if one day he needed them. The generosity I had given before started to feel like a bank account being drained quietly by habit, and I began to notice the balances more clearly. When Noah said he wanted a real party for his birthday, I listened. He wanted windows so he could watch clouds, pizza because he loved it, and a bouncy obstacle course because he loved to climb and fall and climb again. He wanted the front room, the bright spot in the venue where light made everything feel like an adventure. I did what I always did, turned desire into plan. I opened a spreadsheet, labeled columns for cost, vendor, deposit, and contact, and I filled it in until it looked like a promise I could keep. I factored in the price of a custom dinosaur cake, favors that wouldn't fall apart, and a small insurance buffer for the inflatable. The front room package came to $4,200. That number sat heavy at the top of the sheet like a headline. It covered the room fee for 3 hours, a soft surface inflatable course that could handle 8-year-old velocity, pizza ordered fresh from a local place that knew how to feed a crowd, staffing for setup and cleanup, and a small add-on for extra trash pickup because I didn't want to be scrambling after glue and glitter. I told myself it was reasonable. I told myself it was the right thing. I didn't mention most of it. I told only a handful of people. Nate, my friend who offered to haul tables and look after the kids if needed. Noah's other parent who coordinated his time. Mom, because she always wanted to be included. And Aunt Deb, who ignores RSVPs unless nudged. Booking it felt good in a familiar way. Planning is a comfort to me. Spreadsheets are how I make chaos readable. I paid a deposit, penciled the date into my calendar, and put reminders for confirmation calls. I imagined Noah's face when he saw the inflatable, when pizza boxes opened and the smell hit the room, when he'd blow out candles on a dinosaur cake. I saved where I could, no takeout that month, bringing lunches instead of buying them. To make room in the account for the day I was already promising my son. I am not oblivious to how my help had been used before. I had carried household repairs without fanfare, advanced money for vacations when other people forgot budgets, swapped shifts so a cousin could go to a job interview. Those things added up into an impression that I existed to be leaned on. But with Noah, the ledger meant more than numbers. It meant keeping a small human feeling celebrated and seen. I wanted him to have a day that wasn't contingent on everyone else's comfort, or my obligation to make things easy for others. Booking the front room with windows was, I thought, a modest, single-purpose rebellion against the pattern. It was a line in the sand I hadn't realized I needed to draw. This day was for him, paid for by me, planned by me, and not to be commandeered because someone else had a sudden problem. The spreadsheet was neat and unapologetic, and the amount $4,200 was stamped into it like a promise I'd keep, a measure of how much I would do to make sure Noah felt like a priority for once. I didn't want drama. I wanted logistics to be respected, and I believed contracts and clear plans could protect what mattered. 2 days before the party, Lily texted the Pinterest board link and a string of heart emojis like it was the final stamp of approval, as if her little hearts could tuck everything into place. I opened the board and saw the colors she liked, the paper plates, the balloon styles, and I tried not to feel the old tug of expectation. I sent back a thumbs up because that's what I always did, a quiet signal that I had seen it and would handle it. My fingers moved over the screen and already knew the moves. Confirm vendor, double-check the cake, reprint the guest list. Because being the fixer has logic I can follow even when my neck tightens. The week of the party I went to the venue to walk the layout with Marissa, who always signed messages with a smiley face and who made scheduling feel like a simple thing to live up to. She showed me the front room, the light through the windows, the outlet locations, and where the tables could go so the inflatable could be set up without blocking the door. Kids love this corner, she said, tapping a spot on the floor like a chess player. I asked the practical questions, trash pickup, bathroom access, allergy concerns, and she answered like she knew the sort of people who asked those things. I paid the balance without flinching. The card went through, confirmation popped up, and the spreadsheet updated itself in my head as if it were a small, private success. Later that same day Lily called and she sounded casual in that way people use when they're testing how much to say. "What size is the party room?" she asked, as if she were comparing spaces for a different event. I told her the front room was the bigger one with the windows and a view of the street. She hummed. "Oh," she said, light and drifting. "We might see if we can get the park space again." I felt a click inside like a hinge opening. I kept my voice steady. "We booked the front room," I said plainly. "It's paid and confirmed." She made a small noise and said, okay, just checking." The call ended with nothing resolved, just a small vibration of possibility that both of us ignored. Then Mom sent that terse line I knew too well. "Families help each other." No hello, no context, nothing beside the idea. I read it and the word families looped the old rehearsed script into my chest. I've always been the one who helps. I should have replied then. I should have said, "This is Noah's day, it's confirmed," or "Please don't assume." But I didn't. Instead, I closed the message, went back to work, and told myself I would address it later. That late, casual later has been a trait of mine for years. I'm practical in small things and then practical gets eaten by time. I thought I could keep the day clean through logistics and contracts. I spent the next hours packing favors with methodical care. I cut orange ribbon into neat strips because Noah insisted they needed orange streamer ties to be fast, and I folded small instructions into each bag so parents would know what was safe in the kit. My hands moved on autopilot into the motions that had always calmed me. Measurement, repetition, the sense of a list being ticked. I ironed Noah's dinosaur t-shirt until the creases aligned like rules. I checked the Lego set, tightened a few screws, and placed the cake order confirmation in the envelope with the receipts. Each small act anchored me. They felt like little promises I was keeping for my boy. That night I rehearsed the rituals that made the day reliable. I ran the timeline like a coach. Arrive 30 minutes early, set up favors on the long table, check the inflatable strap anchors, greet parents by the door. I imagined Noah racing toward the obstacle course, face bright, and I practiced not cheering too loudly because I didn't want to make him embarrassed. I went over the budget in my head, making sure every line item had a purpose. I told myself I wasn't doing this to prove anything to anyone. I was doing it because he had asked for something that mattered to him. But even as I practiced that message, "Families help each other," sat in my pocket like a coin I couldn't spend. It wasn't the money that stung so much as the assumption that help means taking over. I had seen it before when a plumbing emergency meant my card paid for a new pipe or when a missed payment meant I covered a bill. The pattern was familiar. My help moves into habit and habit becomes entitlement. I knew how this script could end. I also knew how I wanted it to end this time. I slept badly, setting an alarm, ironing one more time in the morning, and reminding myself that a contract was a thing people could enforce. I told myself I would be firm, that I would protect the reservation and keep the day for my son, not for other people's last-minute fixes. I had packed the favors, confirmed the pizza, and balanced the books. The work was practical, the rituals small, and the emotional knot in my chest tightened at the thought of having to say no. I went to bed rehearsing what no would sound like the next morning, because for once I wanted my routine, my son's day, to be kept. I walked into the front room ready to hang the blue block letter banner I had printed that read "Noah is 8, and the air hit me like a surprise I hadn't wanted. The space I had booked and paid for was already colonized by rose gold cursive and pastel plates, a glitter 8 on a cake, and Lily standing near the food table like she owned the sun. My hands went cold. Everything I had counted on, windows, light, the front corner where the inflatable would go, was occupied by someone else's color palette and someone else's plan. I felt the old ledger of favors flip open in my head, every unpaid favor and midnight fix scribbling itself louder. My mother stood near the gift table with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and a small bag in her hand. "We thought you'd understand," she said like a courtesy, like a thing to tidy over with a sentence. Her voice had that even tone she used when she wanted to close a door without closing a conversation. I looked at my sister and then at my boy, and I felt all the small erasures of my life line up behind my ribs. I thought of unpaid loans I covered, of replacing a car battery at dawn, of sitting up with someone who couldn't call their own repairman. Those were the things people forget because they're only visible when they're missing. Noah's fingers tightened on mine. He looked up with the trust that is part of being eight, not mean but plain, like a question. "Daddy," he whispered, "it's okay, maybe next year." His voice was small in that big room of balloons and cupcakes, and it stung because he was trying to protect me the way kids do. He wanted to keep the day from breaking into something ugly. He didn't yet see the pattern, he only saw the person who fixes things, and he didn't want me to be hurt for him. That was enough to make my jaw set. I don't shout unless it's necessary. I had spent a lifetime being the practical guy who arranges the move, pays the fee, picks up the extra gear. I had learned to keep my voice even so the work could get done. This morning the even voice arrived like a tool I'd sharpened, calm, clear, and final. "We reserved this room," I said to Lily, to Mom, to the woman with the cupcakes who had the easy smile of someone hired to be pleasant. "It's paid for, we're using it." There was a rush of excuses like steam from a kettle. "We thought a joint thing would be nice," Lily said, voice soft as velvet. "We couldn't get the park," Mom offered. My hand stayed still. Old grievances added weight like freight in my chest, and with that weight I stopped consenting. I had felt that slow accumulation long before this morning. I had been the backup plan for years, letting people step over polite lines until those lines vanished. People assume the oldest can carry the load, and that help is a permanent resource. I had been patient out of habit and loyalty, and the belief that being useful is being loved. Today, with the banner glittering where my blue letters should have been, I decided not to be useful on autopilot anymore. I took Noah's hand and turned toward the side door. I did it without drama because the thing I wanted most was to protect his day and keep the lesson simple. "We're leaving," I said once quietly. My mother's voice followed us down the hallway, sharp and small. "You're being childish, Jacob." She tried to pull at the thread of shame like a practiced seamstress. The word childlike that was meant to belittle and fold me back into the old shape. I didn't answer. I held my son's hand and left the space they had taken. Outside the venue, the light felt ordinary and honest. Noah ran for the small aquarium in the lobby and pressed his face to the glass while I called the manager and asked for the contract. I canceled extras and asked Marissa to dispute charges for the unauthorized decorations. My phone filled with texts and missed calls, with demands and arguments and explanations that were really directions for me to keep fixing. I let most of them roll to voicemail. I wanted the afternoon to be clean of the drama, so I drove us to the park, bought supermarket cupcakes, and let Noah climb without a clock in his eyes. The day was smaller than I had planned and richer for it in a way I didn't expect. And as we sat on a bench with frosting on our fingers, I felt the edges of something in me set differently. In the lobby, Noah pressed his forehead to the aquarium and asked if the fish were happy, like that was the important question in the world, and I felt my temper soften right then. He didn't demand the front room or complain about the cupcakes. He tried to make it okay for me by saying small things like, "It's okay, Daddy, and maybe next year," as if he could patch my disappointment with kindness. That child's instinct to protect his parent hit me harder than the banner had. It made the choice clear. This wasn't about pride, it was about teaching him that his day mattered. Marissa brought the contract down to show me the reservation was exclusive, that the front room had been booked for our time and not to be shared. She set it on the counter and pointed to the clause with her pen. "Exclusive use," she said, tapping the line like a referee calling a foul. Seeing my signature and the booking details in black and white made something in me click from tired to decisive. Paper doesn't care for excuses or family stories, it only counts dates, times, and paid deposits. Facts can be firm when feelings want to bend. I called my co-parent and left the phone on speaker so Noah could hear the voice that helps raise him. "Do right by our kid," she said without hesitation, the kind of blunt thing parents often need to say to each other when lines blur. Hearing her steady voice gave me the last bit of permission I needed to be firm. It wasn't about punishment. It was about holding a boundary for a small human who deserved a day meant for him. I felt the old script, "Do it for the family," war against the new script, "Do it for your child." This time, the latter one. I went back inside and faced the room that had been redecorated without my okay. The pink and rose gold looked like a rent on my patience. Mom had been hovering near a cupcake tray, and Lily had been arranging a little display as if she were setting the scene for a photo shoot. "Could you take these down?" I asked my mother, voice steady. "This room is rented for our party, and we have a contract for exclusive use. We planned this for Noah." She blinked like the sentence hadn't landed. "We thought you'd understand," she said again, softer but still on that same loop. I said no, we paid for it, and I'm not sharing the space today. I'm protecting my son's day. My words were flat, a kind of professional calm that leaves no room for negotiation. People tried the old moves on me, silk excuses, the soft voice, the guilt, but I'd learned to separate the noise from the core fact. I'd paid, I'd planned, and the contract gave me the right to control the room. If being firm made envelopes of resentment flutter, so be it. I was tired of being the default resource who got blamed when he used it. Lily accused me of ruining the day in a voice that tried to sound wounded but landed sharp. "You're making Zoe cry," she said, like sorrow could be a weapon. I looked at her and said, "I'm not ruining anything. I'm making sure my son's celebration isn't absorbed into someone else's birthday." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. People say things like ruining when they want to flip blame. They forget what it looks like to have someone else scribble over your plans and act surprised you're upset. A circle formed quickly, neighbors, a few relatives, Marissa trying to mediate. They offered compromises that were really ways for them to avoid discomfort. Shift colors, move the banner, add a shared dessert table. I heard each idea and declined politely. "No sharing," I said each time. It wasn't personal theater, it was a line drawn in clear ink. I wanted my son to enter a space that reflected his name, his cake, his colors. And for once I wanted the work I put into it to mean something without being swallowed. My mother's face hardened for a second, then smoothed into a practiced disappointment. "You're so cold," she said, as if boundary setting was a crime against familial warmth. I answered, "I'm tired of paying for other people's convenience. This is a small day for my boy and I'm not giving it away." That felt like a simple sentence that covered 1,000 unpaid favors. Saying it aloud made the ledger visible for everyone, and that visibility made them uncomfortable. After I had the decorations removed and Marissa confirmed she would handle the dispute for unauthorized use, I felt a kind of hollow relief. The room looked like it had been cleared of someone else's intentions, and the light that had drawn me to book it in the first place came back in. Noah ran his hands along the table and grinned like a small emperor taking back his kingdom. He laughed when he saw the inflatable arrive and forgot the rest of the morning like kids can do. I watched him and felt the soft satisfaction of a promise kept. By the time I walked out of that room holding my son's sticky hand, my phone was a storm of calls and texts from people telling me I should have been more conciliatory. I let them pile up. My head was noisy, but the shape of the day felt right where it mattered. I had set a boundary. I had protected his hour. I had taught him without a lecture that some things are worth defending. The tense part of the morning folded into paperwork almost without drama, which suited me. I asked Marissa to cancel the extras, face painter extended hours, the inflatable add-on that had been a center point in Noah's plans, and to note on the contract that services were ended because our reserved room had been used without permission. She typed while I watched, then handed me a printed copy with the lines underlined. The language was plain. It read like a report, not an argument. Turning the fight into administration calmed me in a new way. The facts could stand where emotions wanted to crumble. I called the credit card company from the lobby, the one I used for the deposit, and filed a dispute for the remaining package items that hadn't been delivered because of the unauthorized use. The agent asked for dates, amounts, and the contract number. I read them off slowly, exactly the way I always do when balancing ledgers. I felt oddly clinical, as if I were changing a tire and not stepping into a family fight. Each typed note and each recorded phone log made the morning less about blame and more about tracing a line on a balance sheet. While the paperwork was moving, my phone filled with a different kind of noise. My mother's calls and texts multiplied like alarm bells. At first she used hurt, "Why would you do this to Zoe?" And then the tone shifted into outrage where she accused me of being selfish and cruel. By the time noon came, the messages had rounded into threats thinly veiled as concern. We would be excluded from holidays, family photos, and gatherings if I didn't make amends. The words were meant to pull something out of me, to make me fold like I had before. I stayed calm. I let the messages sit in my notifications while I finished the disputes and confirmed Marissa would submit a report for the venue. The part of me that runs budgets and timelines stepped forward in a way that felt almost mechanical. I lined items up, refund for the unused staffing, credit for the canceled hours, and a claim for the unauthorized decorations that used part of our booked time. Each transaction had a code, a date, and a person who could be reached. I filed claims, saved PDFs, and sent follow-up emails. It was work, nothing more and nothing less, and the predictability of it steadied me. There was a private satisfaction in making the invoices match reality. For years my help had been an invisible line item that other people drew from without accounting. Today I made accounting visible. It wasn't revenge, it was bookkeeping. It was the adult version of saying, "This matters," without shouting. People expect the oldest to absorb costs as if they're dust. I wanted to show that costs have names and numbers and consequences. Doing it methodically made the boundary clearer than any argument could. The calls kept coming. Lily sent messages that twisted soft and sharp at the same time, asking if I'd considered how Zoe would feel. Aunt Deb, when I finally answered, tried the guilt route. Family is family, don't let this thing get in the way. I returned polite, short replies. I'm handling the contract. Please don't ask me to share a space I paid for. No one likes the person who turns a family squabble into a build issue, but someone had to. I chose that role because the alternative would have been to let another small person believe their day could be taken without consequence. In the space between the texts, Noah and I found a pocket of ordinary. We ate cupcakes that weren't custom but were still sugary and loud. He chased a pigeon and fell into giggles, the kind that make your chest ache in a good way. His face was sticky and pleased. He didn't track the family fallout, he only wanted the balloon that refused to fly straight. Being with him was an anchor that grounded all the invoices and calls into something simple and true. By late afternoon, Marissa confirmed the dispute had been filed and that the venue would look into the unauthorized decorations as part of the claim. The refund process could take time. The truth of that was boring but fair. I made a note to track it in my spreadsheet and set a reminder for 30 days from now. The practical part of me was satisfied because the steps were clear and documented. The emotional part of me still hummed with an old ache. It's one thing to do the right thing on paper, another to feel like you're losing your place in a family story. At home that evening, my phone was quieter. Messages had stopped asking for apologies and started to assume consequences. My mother had left a card at our house with "Don't be a stranger" written inside, which read like a demand dressed up as sentiment. I put the card in a drawer next to the canceled payment receipts and the spare batteries, a small, deliberate filing action. The ledger was now both financial and emotional, and filing things away felt necessary. I booked a therapy appointment before bed. It seemed like the next practical move. Handling the transactions had felt right, but I didn't want the transaction to be all of it. There are balances ledgers can't handle, longings, loyalties, the quiet need to be seen. I wanted help untangling those from the invoices and to teach Noah something better than being the family handyman who pays for everyone's comfort. The administrative work had done its job. Now it was time to do the human work that numbers don't show. We drove to a small park because the front room felt like someone else's memory already. Noah clutched my hand like it was a lifeline, and the sun was plain and honest. I bought a box of supermarket cupcakes that had blue frosting smudged across the top, and an old familiar comfort settled in me like a clean shirt. He grinned with frosting on his lip and said, "Daddy, these are cool," like there was no shame in store-brand sugar. That line, his simple joy, was what mattered, not the brand of cake or the glitter on a banner. We ate on a tired bench. Noah shoved a cupcake into his mouth and blue stained the corner of his mouth like a tiny badge. He asked if the fish at the fountain were happy, then declared they must be because they get to swim all day. His questions were small and perfect, and they pulled me back from how furious and tired I felt. We went down the big slide together until our legs were tired, and his laughter got hoarse with how hard he was trying to be louder than the day had been. His breath came out in small, delighted bursts, and I practiced letting him have that light without dragging the rest of the morning back in. My co-parent arrived with juice boxes and a carrying smile that didn't make the moment look staged. She sat on the bench and watched Noah take the top off a juice box and then drink like it had been reserved just for him. She didn't lecture or grandstand, she just helped set up a tiny party on a public bench and handed me a paper plate. "Looks good," she said, and I realized that sometimes sticking to a plan isn't about being stubborn. It's about keeping promises to a small person who loves simple things. It wasn't the spectacle I'd spent hours organizing on a spreadsheet. There were no hired staff, no inflatable obstacle course, no helium bunches bobbing like small, airborne guests. But there were sticky fingers, a small Lego set that we assembled with too few instructions, and a boy who forgot the rose gold banner existed the moment he found a piece that fit. He held the finished Lego dinosaur up like a trophy and named it with a solemn face, and I felt something like relief loosen in my chest. The day was messy and honest and perfectly his. Meanwhile, my phone sat in my pocket and buzzed like a storm in slow motion. Dozens of missed calls and messages stacked up, some short and angry, some pleading for explanation, some lecturing me on civility. "You were dramatic," one text said. "You overreacted," said another. My mother's messages kept changing tone from hurt to demand to thin threats. The family chat swelled with arguments I didn't want to enter into that afternoon, and the image she posted, Lily smiling under the rose gold banner, appeared with the caption, "See, it all worked out." The picture was framed for anyone who scanned it, everything okay, no harm done. It felt like a soft lie turned public. Noah didn't ask about any of it. He didn't need to. He was busy discovering how fast he could run and how loud his laugh could be when he was with someone who made him feel safe. He shoved another cupcake into his mouth and then wiped his face on his sleeve and grinned like he'd just conquered something important. "Daddy, can we go see the pond?" he asked, and I said yes without thinking. His small, sudden requests were the real agenda of the day. I didn't answer most of the calls. My thumb hovered over the screen and stayed still. The messages could wait, the boy couldn't. There will always be a long register of things people will say about a man who finally stops being invisible and unpaid. They will call him selfish, dramatic, obstinate. They will take photos and write captions in ways that rewrite the day into a story that suits them. I let them have that picture. My job that afternoon was to be present, to chew the cupcakes, and to stack tiny bricks with a small dinosaur lover who would sleep that night with pieces under his pillow and a sticky smile in his dreams. When I finally checked the messages, it was a mess of family opinions and demands. My mother wanted a refund to smooth things over. Lily wanted to talk about feelings. Aunt Deb wanted someone to mediate. They wrote as if hurting my son's afternoon would be a temporary thing patched with a dinner invite. They didn't see that my refusal to sweep this under a carpet was about a pattern that had been years in the making. I typed short replies that felt like placing stones in a river, enough to slow the current, not to dam it. "We held the party for Noah," I wrote. "We had cupcakes and he was happy. That's enough for today." By evening, the notifications quieted and the park emptied. Noah fell asleep in his car seat with frosting still on his chin and a small pile of Lego beside him. I drove home slow, the city lights passing like small patient witnesses. I had lost a curated event and gained a day that was mine and my son's in the way that mattered. The anger and the texts and the photos would be there tomorrow, but tonight was a small victory wrapped in blue frosting and laughter. I let the phone rest face down and listened to the quiet breathing of the child in the backseat, and for once the silence felt like a good thing. After we left the park and Noah dozed in the car with a cupcake smear on his chin, I started making practical changes I should have made years ago. I blocked my parents from my payment apps so they could no longer charge things to my account without asking, a quiet switch that felt heavy and necessary. I removed them from my phone plan that night, which meant calling customer service and reading confirmation numbers into my spreadsheet like it was another task on the list. These were small administrative cuts, but each one unstitched a habit that had been stitched into my life for decades. I opened a separate account for my dad and left instructions for how to use it, because cutting them off didn't mean abandoning them. I wanted rules where there had been informal expectations. I told him in a simple note how to withdraw, how to set up autopay for his phone, and who to call for help, no surprises and no free access to my money. It felt weird to write it like a business memo, but after years of covering small emergencies, I wanted clarity. I wanted to show that help can be structured without being forever unpaid labor. I scheduled therapy and actually showed up for the first session the following week. I had used phrases like "I'll see someone" before and never followed through, but this time I wanted help untangling why I always ended up shouldering the invisible costs. The therapist asked about my childhood role as the oldest son and how I learned to be the fixer. Saying it aloud made parts of it obvious in a way spreadsheets never could. I had equated usefulness with worth. Therapy gave me tools to see when I was helping, because I chose to, and when I was being pushed into the role by habit and guilt. I set up automatic transfers for Noah, small monthly amounts into a savings account labeled plainly for future needs. It felt like laying down tracks for something steady. The transfers were not dramatic, but they were literal, money moving away from being a simmering expectation and toward a defined purpose for my son. I filled out forms, clicked through security checks, and set reminders in my calendar to review the accounts every quarter. These practical steps were reminders that generosity can be planned and chosen, not a default left to be tapped whenever someone needed the service of being me. My family pushed for a meeting in the group chat, which they framed as healing. I declined. I didn't need a performed reconciliation where promises were made and forgotten. I kept my calendar simple instead: pancakes on Saturday mornings with Noah, a haircut for him and me on the first Sunday of the month, playdates that required me to RSVP once and mean it. I wanted routines that gave him small, dependable joys and taught him that commitments have follow-through. I wanted to replace the pattern of emergency fixes with steady practices that didn't rely on being endlessly available. They tried to rewrite the story. Photos went up, captions softened, and the narrative around the rose gold banner shifted into "it all worked out," as if the day had been a mutual decision instead of a takeover. My mother posted a smiling picture and wrote "family share, don't be a stranger" in the caption, and later she left a card with the same phrase in the mailbox. I put the card in a drawer by the spare batteries and the measuring tape. The card was a neat package of sentiment without change. I like neat things, but this one needed filing. Putting it away was an intentional act, not an insult. It meant I acknowledged her message, but refused to let it overwrite the changes I had already set in motion. Calls and texts kept coming in waves, some apologetic, some accusing. Lily reached out with a string of messages about feelings and missed cues, and Aunt Deb sent a long text about how families have to forgive. I answered some and left others. My replies were short and practical. I'm working on boundaries, I won't be in a mediated meeting, and I'm focusing on being a present father. Saying those sentences felt like closing tabs on a browser that had been left open for too long. The most important thing, though, was how the afternoons looked now. Noah and I baked a terrible cake one Saturday because we followed the wrong recipe and laughed at how it collapsed. We built forts out of couch cushions and read books with the pages dog-eared. I picked him up from school without text reminders because I had put it on my calendar and cleared the space. Those small, silly things were the new architecture of our lives, predictable, chosen, and defended. I wasn't perfect, but I was purposeful. I kept giving when I wanted to and when it made sense, not as a reflex and not as a condition of being loved. Generosity became something I offered from a held place, not something that others assumed was always on tap. The ledger of favors felt lighter because I had moved many of the line items into labeled accounts and clear plans. My mother and sister could grumble or heal, that was not my weight to carry anymore. At night when Noah fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and adjusted my spreadsheet, not the sterile budgeting one, but a life map of things we wanted, trips, a college fund, a list of small weekend rituals. I closed the laptop and felt tired in a good way. I had set up boundaries and kept a promise to my boy. I was building a life where he came first, where generosity was chosen and celebrated, and where being dependable no longer meant being invisible. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. And drop a comment below, I'd love to hear your thoughts.